I'm Dr. Jen Bickerton, the founder of the Vitamin Advisor and the Vitamin Advisor podcast. And today I'm here with Dr. Emmanuel Apostolidis. He is an adjunct professor at Harvard and a professor at Framingham State University. And I want to welcome you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Dr. Bickerton. It is my pleasure.
So I have a lot I want to ask you and talk to you about today. I understand that you've been doing research with natural ingredients for glucose regulation and, for diabetes and for metabolic syndrome. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how you got started with that?
Yep, that's actually something that started 20 years ago. And I had a sincere interest to understand how natural products can prevent diseases. We know over the years that natural products can have a wide variety of health benefits. And I really want to understand why, the whys. And initially, when I started looking at the mechanisms of actions of natural products, I was looking at many different conditions. But as I continued doing research, I decided to focus on type 2 diabetes management and type 2 diabetes prevention. The major reason for that, actually, there were two major reasons that I want to focus and I got so excited about type 2 diabetes prevention. Is the first is the mechanism. As I was doing research, I was realizing how complex it is to really understand the mechanism of natural compounds, especially when you take into consideration the bioavailability and the different transformations that happen, conjugations that happen to natural compounds once they are absorbed, and how they are delivered in the different parts of the body in order to exert a health benefit. And specifically for type 2 diabetes management research, there is a target in the small intestine. And this target is the inhibition of carbohydrate hydrolyzing enzymes, but also GLUT2 inhibition and SGLT1 inhibition or modulation, which controls the transfer of glucose from the small intestine to the bloodstream. And these specific mechanisms of action require no bioavailability, require no understanding on what is the fate of the natural compounds beyond the small intestine. So from a mechanistic point of view, studying a natural product on how it affects certain markers in the small intestine is much more straightforward and can give you more realistic evidence. On the other hand, with diabetes, as you very well know, we have a very well-defined condition, no disease, which is prediabetes. And prediabetes was first defined in 2003, and the last definition from ADA was established in 2009, which also incorporated not very high levels, not diabetic levels of HbA1c, but levels between 5.7 to 6.4 HbA1c, which is borderline diabetes, and fasting glucose levels, which are borderline diabetic situations. And we know that if you address an individual in the pre-diabetic state with lifestyle interventions and diet, including dietary supplements, you can prevent the progression of pre-diabetes to type 2 diabetes. And this is a target that can be achieved solely with dietary and lifestyle interventions with no need of drugs. So this also fascinated me more to focus on this very well-defined category.
I love that. And I understand you've been working with a specific natural ingredient called KitoMax. And so I want to know, and our listeners want to know, what is KitoMax and what are the benefits? How does it work?
KitoMax is one of my first ingredients that, as I was doing research as a young scientist, eventually got commercialized. And KitoMax is a chitosan oligosaccharide. And initially, when I first started working with chitosan oligosaccharide was because I was advising the biggest producer of high quality enzymatically digested chitosan oligosaccharides in the world, Kumpung Bio, a Korean company. And they wanted to expand their product offerings to other channels. And my goal when I started working with them in 2008 was to try to identify what channels we can take this chitosan oligosaccharide ingredient and channel it towards. Now, when you look at the molecular structure of chitosan oligosaccharide, it is indigestible. It's an indigestible oligosaccharide that comes from chitosan, which is a polymer, indigestible polymer. It is very similar with the structure of dietary carbohydrates. So my first understanding was that it can act at the same receptors as the receptors that dietary carbohydrates like glucose, that's as well, or sucrose in order to be digested. And what we ended up doing was developing a tailored chitosan oligosaccharide by controlling the enzymatic process in order to exhibit maximum inhibition of carbohydrate hydrolytic enzymes, and as a result, reducing the amount of dietary carbohydrates, starch, and sucrose that are digested and subsequently absorbed into the bloodstream. So that's how I got initially involved with KitoMax, and we have developed actually an ingredient that's a leading ingredient in controlling glucose uptake in the small intestine.
And I also understand, I want to ask you about another mechanism of action with increasing insulin sensitivity. So not only can KitoMax, from what I was reading in the article that's in the Vitamin Retailer magazine, this ingredient can not only stop the absorption or block the absorption of carbohydrates, but it can also assist in insulin sensitivity. How does that work? Can you tell me just a little bit about that?
So that's a great observation and an excellent question. So initially, when we developed KitoMax, this ingredient, we're just focusing on the inhibition of carbohydrate hydrolyzing enzymes and on the effect in the small intestine. That was our major focus. And we did a few clinical trials demonstrating this effect. And eventually, we did a clinical trial using pre-diabetic populations. And this clinical trial lasted for 3 months. And after 3 months, we observed a reduction in HbA1c, and we observed also a reduction in on glucose levels, postprandial glucose levels following oral glucose tolerance test. And finally, also, we observed an increase in adiponectin. Now, when you take all these 3 findings together, it shows that KitoMax indeed also improves insulin sensitivity, because by increasing adiponectin, you can increase blood glucose utilization into the cell, and this also explains the reduced postprandial blood glucose levels following oral glucose tolerant tests and the reduced HbA1c that we observed. And after we observed this in the clinical trial, then we did further in vitro research in order to confirm the mechanism. And we observed that chitosan oligosaccharide, KitoMax, the particular chitosan oligosaccharide I have been working on, can also act as an antagonist of PPR gamma, which causes the increase in adiponectin. So, as you know, adiponectin is a hormone that is produced by the skeletal muscle, but also from fat cells. And this hormone, the production of adiponectin, is controlled by PPR gamma. And eventually it results to improvement of insulin resistance.
So we're talking about 2 different mechanisms or several different mechanisms of action. So this ingredient is not just working one way in the body, it's working through different mechanisms of actions for
Exactly.
glucose regulation.
Exactly.
So this is a very exciting ingredient. Now, I understand it's a chitosan oligosaccharide. So there are, and I've seen other chitosan products on the market. Why is KitoMax different? What is the difference between other products that say chitosan and the KitoMax that's on the market?
First of all, chitosan is one of the second most abundant polymer in nature, and it comes as a byproduct from crustaceans, shrimps, crabs predominantly, but also it's found in mushrooms. And chitosan is an indigestible polymer, and it acts as a dietary fiber. And once consumed, because of a different and unique structure that it has, it can have a negative effect in chelating and attaching to different micronutrients that are needed for the body and reducing the absorption of these micronutrients. Now, once you take this polymer chitosan and you digest it, reduce the molecular weight to make an oligosaccharides, these side effects are gone. Now, the reduction of the molecular weight can happen with various ways. The most widely used way to reduce the molecular weight of chitosan is by using acid hydrolysis. By doing that, you cannot control the degree of hydrolysis, and you cannot very well control what kind of molecular weight oligosaccharides you are going to produce. KPB has developed a patented method that digests enzymatically chitosan to develop chitosan oligosaccharides with different molecular weights that are always the same and have been optimized in order to deliver the maximum effect for blood glucose management. So this is the big difference between KitoMax and the other chitosans and chitosan oligosaccharides that you can find in the market. And these health benefits have been demonstrated in 4 preclinical and animal and in vitro trials that are mechanistic, but also in 3 clinical trials. One of them that demonstrates the reduction of HbA1c and in prediabetic populations. And KitoMax is the only natural ingredient, to our knowledge actually today, that has demonstrated reduction in HbA1c in prediabetic populations without the use of any other medication, just by itself. Also, another big difference with KitoMax is that it is the only ingredient in Korea that is approved by the Korean FDA to be sold for diabetes prevention. So KitoMax went through a very rigorous investigation, and a big application, a dossier was submitted that was evaluated by the Korean FDA, by the Korean authorities and scientists within the Korean FDA. And after they evaluated all the research, mechanistic and clinical trials, we were able to use this claim in the Korean market. Of course, this is not relevant for the US because the regulatory perspective is completely different, but I just want to use it as an example of on how KitoMax is different than any other chitosan oligosaccharide in the market or even other product for diabetes management.
Well, this is very exciting information, and this is information that I believe our naturopathic doctors, our chiropractors, they can use this ingredient in protocols for their clients and their patients. And so I'm very excited about this information, and we will be sharing it with as many people as we can. So thank you so much for talking about it. We understand that this is for glucose regulation. KitoMax is a specific chitosan oligosaccharide for glucose regulation and glycemic response benefits. And we're excited about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Pickerton. It was my pleasure to be here with you.
I look forward to talking with you again.
Thank you.